brother's vacation. My parents sold my smart house for my brother's vacation. That's the simple version. The truth, it's far more chilling. They thought they got away with it. They thought the home I poured my life into was just a transaction. But what they didn't know was, my parents sold my smart house for my brother's vacation, and they didn't even realize I was watching from inside the walls. If you've ever had family lie to you, manipulate you, or use you, hit that like button right now. Let me know in the comments below if you think family can ever truly be trusted, because I'm about to show you the story of how my own flesh and blood became the architects of my downfall. This isn't just my story. It's a promise to everyone out there who's ever felt like they were nothing. Because my parents sold my smart house for my brother's vacation, but I'm going to show you how to fight back and win everything back. So if you're ready to see how justice is served and what true strength looks like, subscribe. I'm not just sharing a story. I'm building a community of people who are taking back their lives. Join me. My name is Noah. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my life I felt like I was living in a shadow. Not a physical shadow, but a shadow cast by my younger brother Jake. He was always the star of the show, the life of the party, the one with the jokes, the charm, the effortless charisma. And I was the quiet one, the one who spent my weekends buried in circuit diagrams and lines of code, the one who could fix anything but couldn't seem to fix my family's broken dynamics. I poured all of my ambition and energy into my work, a kind of solace I found in logic and engineering. My latest project, my grandest achievement, was the house I had just finished. I wasn't a contractor or an interior designer. I'm a cybersecurity architect. So the house wasn't just a place to live. It was a living, breathing testament to my life's work. Every light, every lock, every single appliance was hardwired to a system I built from the ground up. It was more than a smart home. It was my castle, a physical monument to everything I'd accomplished on my own. It was the one thing in my life that felt truly and completely mine. I'd recently taken a new job in a different city, a huge step up for my career. I'd spent months setting up the new office, preparing for the move. The plan was to close up the house, get it listed, and finalize the sale in a few months. But my parents, bless their hearts, insisted on helping. "Let us take care of it," my mom had said, her voice warm and reassuring over the phone. "We'll check on it, make sure everything's in order." My dad, ever the man of few words, just grunted in agreement. "It's the least we can do, son," he'd said, "after all your hard work." I trusted them. Why wouldn't I? They were my family. A few days ago, I was sitting in my sterile temporary apartment, drinking lukewarm coffee and reviewing some project logs, when my phone lit up with a notification from the house's primary server. It was a security alert. A standard one, maybe a Windows sensor had gone off. But when I tried to pull up the live feed, the screen went black. I tried again. Nothing. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Something was wrong. This wasn't a glitch. My system was designed to be fail-safe. I went to the main user panel on my tablet, but the unthinkable had happened. My access was gone. The system had been completely wiped, scrubbed clean. The screen simply read, "Access denied by owner." My heart pounded. I tried every backdoor, every failsafe I'd built into the system, but it was useless. It was as if I was a ghost in my own machine, a ghost in the very system I had painstakingly created. That's when I saw it, the image that turned my cold dread into a searing white-hot rage. It was a photo on my brother Jake's social media. He was grinning, standing in front of a sleek black sports car, one that cost more than both of our parents made in a year combined. The caption read, "New chapter. Thanks for the help, Mom and Dad. Feeling blessed." I immediately knew something was terribly wrong. I felt the ground slip from beneath my feet. My parents sold my smart house for my brother's vacation. It was an impossible thought, a betrayal so profound I couldn't wrap my mind around it. I stood there staring at the smiling faces of my family and felt a quiet, devastating anger rise in my chest. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a plan. And then just as my vision started to swim, my phone buzzed with another message. A message from a number I didn't recognize. The text was simple, brutal, and it shook me to my core. He's always been the architect of your downfall. That's when I knew. This wasn't an accident. And it wasn't just my parents and my brother who were involved. There was a ghost in my machine, all right. And it was a ghost I knew all too well. The text message. The one that said, "He's always been the architect of your downfall." It felt like a punch to the gut, but it wasn't from a stranger. It was from someone who knew my family. A person who knew the man behind the curtain. And in that moment, staring at the screen, 1,000 memories came flooding back. It wasn't just a text. It was a key unlocking a vault full of things I'd been burying my whole life. Things that suddenly made a terrifying kind of sense. My dad, Robert. To anyone on the outside, he was just a regular guy. A bank accountant. He wore a tie, drove a minivan, and coached my little league team when I was a kid. But that wasn't the whole story. Before the bank, before the minivan, my dad was an engineer, a brilliant one or so, I was told. He worked on some big complex project, the kind of thing that could have changed his career forever. But it failed. Spectacularly. His company went under and he lost everything. His name, his reputation, his ambition gone in a flash. He never talked about it. It was like a giant gaping hole in our family's history that we were all taught to just walk around. We'd be sitting at the dinner table, and if an ad for a tech firm came on TV, he'd just change the channel. The look in his eyes wasn't just disappointment. It was something else. A kind of cold, quiet rage. He had a chip on his shoulder the size of a mountain, and no one was ever allowed to mention it. It felt like a part of our house was always on fire, but we were all pretending to be fine. We just had to learn to live with the smoke. And then there was Jake, my little brother, my mom's golden boy. He was the kind of kid you either loved or hated, with his bright eyes and easy laugh. To my parents, he was perfect. He played football, he had a million friends, he could talk his way out of anything. He was everything my dad wasn't: sociable, effortless, a natural winner. But the thing is, Jake was always a little lazy. He'd quit jobs after a few months, his college grades were a joke, and he lived at home rent-free well into his late 20s. But my parents never saw it. To them, he was just finding his way. My mom would make excuses for him, always a bit too quickly. Oh, the boss just didn't understand him. Or he's too creative for a 9-to-5. They were excuses, but they felt more like a shield they'd built around him with every dollar they gave him, every debt they paid off. And me, I was the fixer, the quiet one. From the time I could hold a soldering iron, my dad was on my case. He'd get me these old broken gadgets from yard sales and sit with me for hours, showing me how to take them apart and put them back together. He wasn't warm or affectionate about it, not like he was with Jake. It was more like a mission, a project. This is how you build a life, Noah. He'd say, his eyes hard and focused, never looking at me but at the circuit board. This is how you become a man. You build things. I thought he was proud of me. I really did. I thought he was trying to give me the tools he wished he had. But now, looking back on it all, it feels different. It feels like I was just an extension of him. His second chance. He couldn't build his own legacy, so he'd build mine for me through me. He was the architect of my downfall, long before I even had a house. He was the one who designed my whole life, not for me, but for him. And my mom. She just let it all happen. She was so consumed with protecting Jake, with making sure her sweet boy was always happy, that she never seemed to notice me. My hard work was just expected. I'd show her a new robotics project I'd been working on for months, and she'd nod and say, "That's nice, honey," then immediately turn to Jake and ask if he needed any money for the movies. I wasn't just in the shadow. I was a ghost in my own home. I was just the quiet, reliable son who was always fine. And because I was always fine, they never really looked. They never saw the late nights, the stress, the loneliness. They never saw that I wasn't fine at all. I was just an afterthought. I remember one time when I was in high school. I just won a regional science fair, a big deal for a kid like me. I came home beaming my trophy in my hands. I'd practiced my speech a dozen times, ready to tell them all about it. But when I walked in, the house was buzzing. Jake had just gotten his learner's permit. They were all in the living room looking at a picture of a used Honda Civic they were thinking of getting him. My mom was tearing up my dad had his arm around Jake's shoulders. My dad saw me, looked at my trophy for a second, and then just turned back to the picture on the phone. "That's great, Noah," he said, his voice flat. "But can you go get us a soda? We're celebrating." I didn't say a word. I just went to the kitchen and got them their sodas. I sat alone in my room later that night, the trophy on my desk feeling like the biggest trophy in the world couldn't have made them see me. This went on my whole life. My grades were perfect. My college was paid for entirely by scholarships I earned myself. My jobs were all successful. And every time their reaction was the same, a brief nod, a polite, "Good for you," and a quick return to whatever issue Jake was having. They praised his potential, his big ideas, his spirit, while they never saw my results. I was the responsible one, the boring one. And being the responsible one meant my triumphs just didn't matter. They didn't feel earned to them. It was just a given because I was the one who was supposed to be good at everything. I spent my whole life believing this was just how it was. Believing that some families were just like that some parents loved one child more than the other, and that I just had to be okay with it. That my hard work, my self-reliance, my success, that was my reward. But I realize now that wasn't a reward. It was the price of admission. The price of being allowed to exist in a house where my brother's life was the only thing that mattered. Now, standing in this cold, empty apartment, that old feeling of being invisible was back. But this time it was different. It wasn't just a feeling. It was a fact. They had literally made me disappear. They took my home, my sanctuary, the physical manifestation of all my hard work, and just erased it. To them, it wasn't a house. It was just an asset. An asset to be liquidated for Jake's latest fresh start. And the worst part, it was probably my dad who had the idea. His old engineer brain seeing an opportunity where I saw a home. But that anonymous text message, he's always been the architect of your downfall. It wasn't just telling me about a secret. It was a warning. A warning that this went deeper. That I wasn't just a victim of a last-minute decision. I was a casualty in a game that had been played my whole life, and I just didn't know the rules. Not until now. That text message from an unknown number, the one about my dad being the architect, it felt like someone had peeled a layer off my reality. It wasn't just a new betrayal. It was the realization that the past, the one I thought I understood, was a lie. It made every sacrifice, every late night, every moment of being unseen feel even colder. Because it was all part of a plan. I'd always considered my work my refuge. It was a place where things made sense. In the world of ones and zeros, there was no room for emotional bias or favoritism. If you put in the work, you got the result. Simple. That's why I poured my entire soul into building the smart house. It wasn't just a project, it was my sanctuary. Every circuit board I soldered, every line of code I wrote was a boundary I was building between myself and the chaotic, illogical world of my family. The house was my masterpiece. I spent a year finding the perfect lot, a quiet little neighborhood with old trees and good light. I cashed out a chunk of my savings, took out a small loan, and began building my vision. My vision was a home that was completely and utterly mine. No leaky pipes my dad would complain about but never fix. No doors that creaked just right to wake my mom when I came home late. This was a place where I was in control. The place where I was the main character. I designed the entire system myself from the ground up, a custom OS that controlled everything from the lighting to the irrigation. I even built a small fail-safe server in the garage just in case. I named it Aegis after the shield of Zeus. A little nerdy, I know, but it was my joke with myself. A silent promise that this place was protected. That I was protected. My family, of course, didn't get it. Not a single bit. Why spend all that time on a dumb house? Jake had scoffed once when he came over. He was there to borrow my brand new pressure washer for some supposed landscaping gig that I knew would never materialize. You could have just bought a new condo downtown, man. Something with a view. I tried to explain that this wasn't about a view. It was about building something from nothing. He just shrugged, a look of genuine confusion on his face. He'd never had to build anything for himself. Everything was just handed to him. My parents were worse. They'd come over for a perfunctory dinner, and my mom would just stand in the living room, hands on her hips, her eyes scanning the place as if looking for a flaw. "The kitchen's a little small, honey," she'd said once, a condescending smile on her face. "And all this tech, it's too much. The walls are peeling in the hall. You should really fix that." My heart just sank. She wasn't seeing the thousands of hours I'd spent on the wiring, the custom panels, the intricate smart home grid. All she saw was a house that wasn't up to her standards, a project that in her eyes wasn't worth the trouble. I'd just smile and nod. I knew they didn't understand, and I didn't care. Not then. I was building this for me, not for them. And I was so proud of it. But every dismissal, every little microaggression was a small, subtle weight on my shoulders. I was so focused on building my castle that I never saw them trying to dismantle it one passive-aggressive comment at a time. A few months before I left for my new job, I had a conversation with my dad that now, in retrospect, feels like a chilling piece of foreshadowing. We were sitting on the porch a quiet night, the only sounds the humming of the cicadas and the distant traffic. He wasn't looking at me, but at the house itself. "You know, son," he said, his voice lower than usual, "this place, it's a hell of a project. You really went all out." I felt a swell of pride. Finally, a word of genuine praise from the man who'd taught me everything. "Yeah, Dad," I said, a small smile on my face. I did. He didn't return the smile. He just kept staring at the house. "You're a lot like me, you know," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "But you're smarter. You know how to build something that lasts. Something with no flaws." I didn't get it at the time, but the word flaws hung in the air like a ghost. He wasn't talking about my house. He was talking about his own failed project. He was talking about himself. "And you know," he continued, turning to me, a strange, calculating look in his eyes, "a lot of people think a system with no flaws is a strong system. But I'll tell you something, son. It's the opposite. It's a fragile system. It only takes one small thing to bring it all down." I didn't know what to say. I just sat there listening to the hum of my own smart house, the very system he was speaking about. I thought he was just reminiscing, sharing an old bitter lesson from his past. I was too wrapped up in my own pride and the feeling that I'd finally made him see me to realize what he was truly saying. He wasn't giving me advice. He was stating a fact. A terrible, terrifying fact that he had already figured out for himself. That he had already set in motion. And I, in my naive little bubble of success, had walked right into the middle of it. I had built the perfect system, the one with no flaws. I had built the perfect target. And all the while, my dad, the man who taught me how to build, was watching from the shadows, just waiting for the right moment to tear it all down. That conversation with my dad, it was a ghost that haunted me for weeks. I kept replaying it in my head, dissecting every word, every look. A fragile system, he'd said. I felt a knot of anxiety twisting in my gut. I tried to shake it off, telling myself he was just being nostalgic and bitter about his past. My career was taking off. I had the perfect house, the perfect plan. What could possibly go wrong? I dove into my new job, a massive project for a tech firm, the kind of work that demanded all of my attention. I was in the zone working from my temporary apartment, my old life 1,000 miles away, both physically and emotionally. I'd call home once a week. My mom would be busy, my dad would be watching a game, and Jake would just never be around. It was a familiar pattern, and for a while it was comforting. A cold, distant comfort, but comfort all the same. "Everything's fine, Noah," my mom would say, her voice a little too cheerful. "The house is great. Don't you worry about a thing." But then the photos started showing up on Instagram. At first they were small things. Jake at a fancy restaurant he could never afford, a new flashy watch on his wrist. I brushed it off. Maybe he'd finally gotten a good job. A part of me, the part that still wanted to believe in the best of him, was even proud. And then came the big one. It was a carousel of photos on his feed, a cinematic highlight reel of a luxury trip. White sand beaches, crystal clear infinity pools, and him, Jake, standing on the deck of a yacht, a glass of champagne in his hand, a smug, satisfied smirk on his face. The caption read, "Paradise found. Thanks for the help, Mom and Dad. Feeling blessed." My phone felt like a stone in my hand. My blood ran cold. The Maldives, that kind of trip, that was at least $30,000. Where did he get that kind of money? He'd just lost his 5th job. My parents weren't millionaires. There was no way they could have paid for that, not without a major cash injection from somewhere. I went back to the picture. I zoomed in on his face, that stupid, self-satisfied grin. And then I noticed the watch. It wasn't the one he had a few weeks ago. This one was new, shiny, expensive. It was a Rolex, the kind of thing you buy when you feel like you finally truly won. And that's when it hit me, like a sledgehammer to the chest. They sold it. They actually sold the house. I sat there frozen, the phone burning a hole in my hand. I thought of every conversation, every evasive answer. Every time my mom said, "Don't you worry about a thing." It all made sense now. The glint of chrome in that family photo was just the first piece of the puzzle. The new car, the fancy watch, the tropical vacation. It was all paid for with the house I had bled and sweated to build. My heart didn't just break, it shattered. It felt like I was physically falling the ground, giving way beneath my feet. Not from anger, not yet. Just from a bottomless, soul-crushing sadness. They didn't just take my property. They took my sanctuary, the one place I had built for myself. The one place where I was finally in control. They took the physical manifestation of my hard work and handed it over to the person who had never lifted a finger in his entire life. I needed to see it. I had to see their faces. I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring, her voice still too bright. "Noah, how are you, honey?" "Mom," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Did you guys sell the house?" There was a long, terrible silence on the other end. I could almost hear her heart pounding. And then I heard my dad's voice, cold and flat in the background. "Give me the phone." The line went quiet for a moment, and then my dad's voice, calm and steady as ever, came on. "Noah, we need to talk. Not on the phone." "Dad," I said, my voice cracking. "Just tell me, did you sell it?" He sighed, a long, weary sound, as if I were the one causing all the trouble. "It was for the best, son. We'll explain everything when you get home." And with that, he hung up. I just sat there, the dial tone ringing in my ear. They weren't even going to have the courage to tell me the truth. They were going to make me fly 1,000 miles home just so they could look me in the eye and say that it was for Jake's fresh start. That it was for the family. My mind was reeling. I thought of the countless times they bailed Jake out. I thought of all my hard work, all my sacrifices, and how it had all come to this. It was all a transaction. I was the product, Jake was the consumer, and my parents were just the brokers. I felt so utterly alone. All my life, all my hard work had been to prove my worth. To show them I was just as good, just as worthy of their love as Jake. But I had failed. I hadn't built a castle. I had built a piggy bank. A piggy bank that they had just smashed to pieces. I thought that was the end of it. The betrayal. The moment when my heart finally truly broke. I had no idea that was just the beginning. I thought I had lost everything. But what I was about to discover was a truth so twisted, so chilling, that it would make everything that had happened so far look like a game. Because it was a game. A game that my own father had been playing with me for years. A game that was about to get very, very real. The betrayal felt like a sickness. It wasn't a gut punch. It was a slow, creeping poison that started in my stomach and spread to every part of me. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I just sat in my cold, temporary apartment staring at my tablet, going over the logs from the smart house over and over again. Every line of code I had written with so much pride now felt like a curse. Every security patch was a joke. Every system a lie. They didn't just sell my house. They sold a part of me. My new job, the big shot career move, fell by the wayside. The client calls went to voicemail. The project deadlines blurred into one giant, insignificant moment of static. My entire life, my identity was built on logic and control. I was a man who solved problems. But this problem, this one had no solution. It was a paradox. How could my own family be the ones to dismantle everything I'd ever built? How could my father, the man who taught me how to wire a circuit board, be the one who pulled the plug on my life? I spent days like that. Just existing. The only thing I could focus on was the system I had lost. I had to understand how. How could my access be completely wiped? I built that system. I knew every line of code, every backdoor, every failsafe. It was impenetrable, I thought. And that's when I noticed it. It wasn't a glitch. It was too clean, too perfect. I had designed a fail-safe protocol to prevent unauthorized wipes. If the primary user account was deleted, a secondary protocol should have automatically sent me an alert and given me temporary access to a remote recovery console. But that hadn't happened. My access was just gone. It wasn't a simple hack. It was a surgical professional job. The digital equivalent of a ghost leaving no footprints on the floor. A cold, creeping dread started to set in. This wasn't some real estate agent who got a little too creative with a forged signature. This was a sophisticated, high-level operation. This was the work of a professional. A professional who knew my system better than anyone else. A professional who knew my every habit, every line of code, every tiny flaw. And then I remembered that anonymous text message. He's always been the architect of your downfall. I knew who it was. I knew the only person in the world who could have done this. The man who taught me everything. My dad. A wave of nausea hit me. The anger, the sadness, the pain, it all crystallized into a terrifying singular truth. This wasn't a sudden act of greed. This wasn't an improvised plan. This was meticulously plotted. He didn't just sell my house. He planned my entire career, my life, my achievements. Just so he could do this. I wasn't a son. Career, my life, my achievements. Just so he could do this. I wasn't a son. I was a project. His final project. I felt like I was going crazy. I needed a second opinion. I needed someone to tell me I was wrong. I called my best friend Liam. He and I met in college. He's a software developer, but he's also one of those people who just sees things. He came over immediately, a look of concern on his face. He sat there, his head in his hands, as I laid out the entire story from my dad's failed engineering career to the cryptic text message to the impossible clean sweep of my system. He didn't say anything for a long time. I could see him running the scenarios in his head just like I had. He went through my logs, his brow furrowed, his fingers flying across the tablet. "This isn't possible, man," he kept muttering. "You're saying he knew all this, he planned this." "Look at the code, Liam," I said, my voice hoarse. "Look at it. The recovery protocol was disabled at the source, at the hardware level. The only way to do that is with a physical override. Someone was in the garage. Someone had to literally go into the server." Liam went quiet. I watched his eyes scan the lines of code. And then he stopped. His hands stopped moving. He went back to a single line. A line I'd written a decade ago. A line of a subroutine that I'd copied from an old programming book my dad had given me when I was a teenager. A little bit of code I'd always thought was kind of a fun little quirk. A little bit of code that now looked less like a quirk and more like a carefully placed back door. "Noah," Liam said, his voice a low whisper. "This isn't a glitch. This is a back door. A back door your dad built into your system a long time ago. He knew you'd use his code. He knew you'd trust him. He's been waiting for this moment his entire life." My world went quiet. Everything that had ever felt off, every weird conversation, every strange look, every subtle dismissal, it all clicked into place. The final piece of the puzzle. My father didn't just sell my house. He sold my life. He sold my freedom. He sold my identity. He was the architect, and I was nothing more than his final project. My life, my entire being had been built on a foundation of lies, and now the entire structure was coming down, and I was going to be the one to bring it down. That text message, the one from Liam, was all the validation I needed. He'd found it, the back door, the piece of code my dad had planted in my system over a decade ago. It was a single line that gave him root access to everything, a skeleton key to my entire life's work. My world had just become a terrifyingly clear place. The sadness was gone. The confusion was gone. It had all been replaced by a quiet, burning rage, a new kind of resolve. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was a strategist. And this time I was playing for keeps. Liam and I spent the next 2 days in a blur. We combed through my old hard drives, every single line of code, every project my dad had ever helped me with. We found it all. The hidden folders, the encrypted logs, the email drafts detailing the plan. My dad wasn't just a bitter man. He was a meticulous one. He had meticulously documented every step, every wire transfer, every meeting with the buyers. The plan wasn't just about money. It was about control. He'd made a series of bad investments, and he needed a quick and clean way to get out of debt. My house, the physical manifestation of my hard work, was the perfect target, and I was the perfect tool. The thought made me sick. I didn't want to see my family. I wanted to disappear, but Liam talked me down. "No, man," he said, his voice firm. "You don't disappear. You confront them. You make them see what they did, and you do it on your terms." He was right. Running away was what I'd always done. What I'd done my entire life. Not this time. So I called my mom. My voice was calm, almost unnervingly so. "Mom," I said, "I'm coming home. I want to talk. We need to settle things." There was a long pause. I could hear the hesitation in her voice, the fear. But she agreed. We decided to meet at a small out-of-the-way restaurant, a public place, just in case. Walking into that restaurant, I felt an eerie calm. My parents and Jake were already there, sitting in a booth, sipping water. My mom, Linda, was fidgety, her hands clasped on the table. My dad, Robert, was as calm and composed as ever. He had a faint, almost imperceptible smirk on his face, the smirk of a man who thought he had already won. Jake looked bored, his eyes glued to his phone. He looked up, gave me a half-hearted wave. "Hey, man," he said, as if we were just meeting for a casual lunch. "How was your trip?" I sat down across from them, my laptop bag at my feet. I didn't say anything. I just looked at each of them. My mom, the emotional shield. My dad, the quiet puppet master. And Jake, the willing puppet. The three of them, a perfect little unit of selfishness and entitlement. My mom broke the silence, her voice trembling slightly. "Noah, we're so glad you're here. We really need to explain." "Don't," I said. My voice was low, steady, and it hung in the air like a stone. "Don't say anything. I'm not here to talk. I'm here to show you something." I took my laptop from my bag, placed it on the table, and opened it. They all leaned in a mix of curiosity and fear on their faces. "This is the system from my house," I said, my fingers flying across the keyboard. "My custom operating system. I just want to show you the security logs from the last week." I pulled up a complicated-looking graph on the screen, a web of green and red lines. "See all the green? That's me. That's my access. And then see that red line? That's when my access was permanently denied. It was done by a system administrator." My dad's face went from calm to cold. "I don't know what you're talking about, Noah. This is ridiculous." "No," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "What's ridiculous is you thinking you could get away with it." I clicked another button. A new window popped up. It was a digital map of my smart house. I pointed to a small blinking red dot. "That's my father's IP address," I said, "and that's a timestamp. It shows the moment he physically entered my garage. And this," I said, clicking one more time, pulling up a series of encrypted log files, "is the data he took. Everything. Every file, every security log, everything he needed to completely erase me from my own home." My mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Jake looked up from his phone, a confused look on his face. "What are you talking about, Noah? What's going on?" He said, his voice thin. "What's going on, Jake?" I said, my voice rising. "Is that Mom and Dad sold my smart house for your vacation. The money you spent on that lavish trip. That's my life's work. And the car you're driving, that's what was left over." Jake's face went white. He looked at my dad, who was now staring at me not with anger, but with a cold, almost detached surprise. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. His voice was a flat denial. "Don't lie, Robert," a voice said from behind me. We all turned. It was a man mid-50s holding a